Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Joe Samaniego here, along with Isha Azim from Racing with Isha. We have Ben Schneider from Ben Schneider YouTube channel and lastcar.info. We also have Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. A big hello to all our viewers, including one of our regulars, Dimas from Indonesia. Good morning to you, and thanks for tuning in as always. And as always, a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Link in the video description. We'll read your name on the air. We're planning for 2024 as the 2023 season is wrapping up. And of course, if you want, you could do a YouTube super chat right here through YouTube or buy me a coffee. If you're not watching us live, you'll see the thanks button. Hit that. And you could give cup of coffee to a particular member of the Grid Network team, and they'll thank you on the air. Isha, we got to start with NASCAR, and that is another Grid Ranking Series that their season has come to an end.
Yes, Joe, starting off with NASCAR. So the 75th season of NASCAR is now in the books. And doing a quick recap of some NASCAR history, in 1949, Red Byron won the first Cup Series Championship. In the 25th season, Benny Parsons won his first championship with only one win. In the 50th season, Jeff Gordon won his third championship. And now in the 75th season, Ryan Blaney has just won his first championship for Team Penske and Ford. And Blaney didn't have it easy. He had to battle and pass Kyle Larson and William Byron multiple times, including after the last caution of the race for a Kyle Busch spin. Ryan Blaney didn't win the race, but he won the NASCAR Cup Series champion. So Ben, starting with you, how impressed were you by Blaney's performance at Phoenix?
I was very impressed, and I think that this sends a message that I know what you guys were talking about on the pre-race show yesterday a little bit as well. We've kind of thought of Ford as the number 3 manufacturer this year behind Chevrolet and Toyota. Certainly not a huge deal behind, obviously, winning a handful of races here and there, but just seemed like they were missing a little bit of the magic that Chevy and Toyota had, and we weren't sure if they were going to be able to capitalize when it got time to this point of a year. And they certainly were able to do just that with Ryan Blaney and Team Penske today. The second consecutive championship for Team Penske, the 44th championship. I just noticed that tweet going out a couple hours ago for that entire organization across all the series that they compete in. So very storied history there. Ryan Blaney is now a part of that. It is thoroughly deserved. And he had to go head-to-head with, as what the guys were saying on the NBC broadcast, somebody who is oftentimes floated out with his name in the conversation for best driver in the world right now. Whether or not that's an accurate statement is, I guess, up to you in terms of where you rank NASCAR Cup in terms of the different disciplines and series out there. But there is no denying Kyle Larson is an incredibly talented racing driver, and Ryan Blaney went head-to-head with him and beat him straight up. A thoroughly deserving, I guess not race victory. We'll get into that here a little bit later on in the show. Because it's taken a race victory, and I think Ryan Blaney thought he was going to take a race victory with how hard he was racing Ross Chastain there in the closing laps, but nonetheless did everything he needed to do to win the championship. And again, coming from a guy that does not like this format, that doesn't mean I can't sit back and give credit where it's due and call Ryan Blaney a deserving champion, because he did everything he needed to do according to the system and rules that he was given.
Hi, Dylan. YRB, baby. That's right. Ryan Blaney won the championship. And word of the day for me is perseverance, because Ryan Blaney had to continue to fight this car. He did not like this car from the start of this race. He was mad on the radio. He kept having to get by Kyle Larson to getting past William Byron. He just never gave up. And there was that point, he was super aggressive with Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. for this lead. He did not need to win this race, which he did not. But there was a point he was like 3 seconds ahead of Larson and Byron, just fighting so hard to get that lead from Chastain, and just never stopped. And as a viewer, it's just like, what are you doing, Ryan? Because you don't need to do this. You might get yourself wrecked. He made contact with, I believe it was Truex or Chastain, one of the two. But he never stopped. Even when the Kyle Busch caution came out, it seemed like things might be over, because we saw what this happened in 2021 when Kyle Larson won his championship. And it happened again. Larson, the 5 team, they had a better pit stop. And the 12 team was just slower all day long, pretty much. But Blaney persevered. He still managed to beat who Ben, as you said, is, many say, Larson might be the best driver of the current era, just overall. And Blaney still managed to get by him, who he was angrily behind all day long. That was like the theme of the day, which is Blaney can't get by Larson. Well, he did it late in this race. He goes on to win the championship. I'm so impressed with his performance, because there were times I'm like, you're driving over your head a little bit, but no, he won the championship, and so impressive. Like, this is a new Ryan Blaney. I've said that the past couple of weeks. We are living in a new Ryan Blaney era right now.
And Alex, as you mentioned, perseverance was definitely the word to use for his performance. However, if we take a look back at the summer, Blaney was having a very mediocre streak, including a 6-race streak of 5 finishes of 20th or worse, with only 1 top 10 at Atlanta. He had 1 win in the regular season, he was 12th seed in the first round, and in the first round, he had 1 top 10 finish, 1 15th place, and his 22nd second place. But in the second round, after being 28th at Texas, he had a win at Talladega and a complete flip. He was 12th at a lame duck roval and saw top 10s the rest of the way. So Alex, is Blaney the biggest surprise champion in this playoff format?
First, thank you to Adam for the congratulations. I am a big Blaney fan. I really appreciate that. But I don't think he's the biggest surprise. I really don't. I don't know who I necessarily would consider that. I guess 2020 with Chase Elliott. I mean, Elliott was good that year, because I think the bigger surprise that year was Harvick not winning it. But I mean, Blaney's championship, he had better stats than Joey Logano did a year ago going into the finale race, and Blaney also won the championship. So I wouldn't say he's the biggest champion. I would say he was more of an underdog that ended up winning it. But a lot of people still called him the favorites. I don't know if you can call him underdog, but I don't know. I don't think he's the biggest surprise, just because of how he's pretty much on par with both of Logano's championships that have happened recently. I would still say 2020 was the biggest surprise with this format.
I think Blaney was the biggest surprise of the 4, at least going into the playoffs, based on the full season performance of each of the championship 4. I think Blaney, and again, I know that this is not an exact science. I know people don't like when they do this, but Racing Reference still tracks it, so take that for what it's worth. I think Blaney was 6th of the non-playoff standings, if you will, was each of the other 3 in the championship 4 ahead of him. But again, I know the racing would be different, and it's not an exact science or metric, so don't worry there. But I'm with you, Alex. I think the biggest surprise in 2020 was anybody other than Kevin Harvick winning that one. So whoever ended up with that one was going to be a bit of a surprise based on how dominant Harvick was that year. In terms of who's the biggest surprise ever, I would maybe lean Logano's 18 championship, just because, kind of the whole big 3 and me mantra that he had going into that Homestead race, and all the talk about Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick that year. But I think Jimmy Johnson in 2016 actually might be the biggest surprise, based on how his full season performance was wrapping up. And then when he got into the playoffs, winning the opening race in the round of 12, winning the opening race in the round of 8 in Martinsville to lock in his spot in championship 4, and then not really performing at Texas and Phoenix, but then going out and being in the right place at the right time. It looked like Carl Edwards was going to win that championship, and then Dylan Lepton, of all people, loses a tire, brings out a caution, and obviously we all know what happened next with the accident there that ultimately was the final moment of Carl Edwards' NASCAR Cup Series career. We didn't know it at the time, but that led to him stepping away very suddenly in the offseason and calling it a career much earlier than we expected. Jimmy Johnson was there to pick it up and swoop in and pick up his 7th and ultimately last championship. I think based on how that race played out, I would say Jimmy Johnson, even though he's a great champion of a sport, one of our greatest champions ever, his 7th championship to me might be the most unexpected and therefore biggest surprise of the last decade here in this playoff era.
And now coming...
Oh, sorry. I wanted to add something. Before we move on to talk about Chastain, I do want to say Team Penske winning back-to-back championships. They didn't get their first NASCAR championship until 2012 with Keselowski. They now have 4. Like within the past decade plus a year, like that's really remarkable for Team Penske, and as well as their success over on the IndyCar side. And Team Penske, they also got the Indianapolis 500 win this year, a NASCAR championship. And then last year, they swept the IndyCar and NASCAR championships. Team Penske's on a roll right now, and quite frankly, I don't know if anyone's going to be able to stop them. We'll have to wait and see.
But I just want to go back, Alex, to the point that you just made there. They had to wait until 2012 with Keselowski. Think of who drove for Team Penske. Rusty Wallace, NASCAR champion. Kurt Busch, NASCAR champion. Ryan Newman, Daytona 500 winner, used to win every pole every weekend, won a bunch of races. I mean, it's not like they didn't have great drivers and future Hall of Famers driving their cars. It was kind of surprising to me that, realizing as a kid when Keselowski won it several years ago, that that's the first time they'd ever won a Cup championship. I would have thought for sure they had a Cup championship in that team's history. But they had to wait a long time to win one, and now that they've won one, they've won 4 now, like you mentioned, with 3 out of the last 6, if I'm doing the math correctly, with Logano's 2 and now Blaney's today. Just a remarkable stretch for that team.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And now coming back to this race, so Blaney never actually led the race. William Byron started and led all of stage 1. Kevin Harvick on lap 93 took the lead from William Byron in one of his best tracks. The rest of stage 2 saw non-playoff drivers Harvick, Chastain, and Chris Buescher lead to the conclusion of stage 2. Ross Chastain went on to take the win and end 2023 on a positive note for Trackhouse. Now, Trackhouse will have sponsorship from Busch next year. So Chastain ends with 2 oval wins this year. Ben, starting with you, do you believe he's a threat for 2024?
Absolutely. I mean, I bet Ross Chastain is wishing he had this car last year when he was in the championship for. I mean, think about how Trackhouse must be feeling right now. They got to be fired up. And it took NBC a little bit to get to Chastain, obviously, because everybody was focused on the champion Brian Blaney in the championship 4. But when they got to his victory lane interview, that was the first thing he mentioned. Like, this has never been done before, right? At least in the Cup Series. I know it's been done a couple times in Xfinity and obviously in trucks with Ben Rhodes this weekend as well. But never happened in the Cup Series under this format that the championship 4 winner and champion of the Cup Series didn't win the final race, whether it was at Homestead or Phoenix. And Ross Chastain did something that's never been done before today as well. So, if you look at where Trackhouse was last year, I think obviously not quite as flashy or on fire as they were in 2022. They did win a couple of races with Chastain. Obviously, who can forget Chicago in that Project 91 entry of Shane Van Gisbergen? But, I'm sure everybody at Trackhouse is going to be very, very motivated to know that, like, hey, we can go win Phoenix. We just have to get there in terms of the playoff standings and get there to have our spot in the championship 4. And if we can do that, Ross finished, what was it, 235 feet? I think that's been kind of a motto at Trackhouse this year. That's how close they came to the championship in 22. And to have the race win today in 2023, knowing that if they had been in the championship 4, we'd be talking about them as champions right now. I think absolutely Ross Chastain is going to be a threat next year in the Cup Series.
See, I kind of disagree because Ross Chastain was kind of MIA all year, besides Nashville and today, and maybe a couple bright spots earlier in the season. I don't know what's going on at Trackhouse, and they're going to be supporting the 3rd Spire car next year as well, so I don't know if their resources are going to be spread too thin. I don't know. They weren't the same as they were last year because Suarez was very off this year. Chastain, I think Chastain's problem with him is his aggressiveness. He's really backed off on that. So we'll have to wait and see with him for sure. But I don't know. Trackhouse is kind of a wild card, in my opinion. I don't know what to expect for them next year. I don't think they're a threat right now, though. I mean, if they come out strong next year like they did last year, I don't know. But they need to have both of their cars back in the playoffs next year. Like Daniel Suarez needs to step it up, and Ross Chastain needs to bump up his aggressiveness back up to where it was just a tad. Maybe not fully, but just a bit, so he'll get back to competing the way he was today.
And just to make a quick correction, Ryan Blaney did in fact lead 2 laps of the race. But if we take a look at some of the other notable drivers of the day, we had Michael McDowell with another top 10 finish, and Bubba Wallace also in the top 10. Kevin Harvick, it was his final start of his full time career, and he finished in 7th place. No doubt Rick Hendrick's team will be a threat in 2024. Kyle Larson won the race off the pit road but had nothing for Blaney. Now, Byron said the track changed against him and it didn't have much, but all day they were close together. So, Alex, is this the best Championship 4 race at Phoenix that we have seen?
100%. Like, easily the best Phoenix race. Maybe not Championship 4, that's still a Homestead thing. But this Phoenix race was really, really good in my opinion. You had multi-groove racing at Phoenix. Like, I don't recall seeing that too often in recent memory. Like, this was a lot of fun. This race wasn't goofy like the truck race was, and it wasn't too goofy like the Xfinity race got at times. Like, this was like as good as you can probably get for a Phoenix finale for NASCAR. I still would prefer it at Homestead, but like this was fantastic, and I think a lot of that had to do with how Ryan Blaney was just aggressive. Like, Ryan Blaney was the show. Like, he could have just chilled out behind Chastain and Truex at that point, but he decided not to, try going for the win. That was so thrilling, and his battle all race long with Larson. Just, I don't know, maybe this car, it's starting to make a turn for the right, maybe, on these short tracks, because Martinsville was a lot better than expected, and so was Phoenix.
I mean, it was all right. I mean, I don't know that it was a great race. It was certainly the best race of the Phoenix era, like you were mentioning, Alex. I still think the season finale should be at Homestead. I think that's the perfect track for it. I think it's the best mile and a half that we have. I guess I'm kind of in between you, Alex, and what Jeff Gluck tweeted halfway through the race, because Jeff Gluck, and I really like Jeff Gluck, just to be clear, but I'm not sure. I mean, he said something about it. I don't even think Texas would be this bad at some point. I get what he's getting at, I guess, with the Vieiro, and obviously Ryan Blaney was very frustrated with his battle with Ross Chastain and clearly being a faster car but not being able to get around him. So I think the car definitely still needs work. But just thinking back to what we got at Texas last year, I certainly don't want the season finale to be at Texas. I'm not going to hop on that bandwagon or anything. I still want it at Homestead. I don't really want it at Phoenix. I think that experiment's kind of run its course. But I'll give credit where it's due. It was a great battle between Blaney and Larson from a championship, and I think of the 4 races that we've gotten in the playoff era that have had their finales at Phoenix, I think certainly the best of those 4. I will certainly give it credit where it's due there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ben, that this was like Homestead's still better. But for me, Phoenix, like for Jeff Gluck's comment, first of all, this was not Texas. Texas garbage. Like, throw that away. But I really enjoyed myself. Maybe it's just because Blaney was involved in all this stuff. I don't know, but I really liked it. I haven't enjoyed like a track like Phoenix or Richmond like that in the Cup Series in quite a long time. So for me, this was great, and this is probably as good as you're going to get. But yeah, the car, it does need work. So if they can do that, they hinted at maybe they'll do horsepower. It's probably like last resort, like absolute last resort if they'll ever do that. But if they do something with the car to make it better on these short tracks, they might actually have a decent product at Phoenix if they really have to keep it there. I'd rather they go to Homestead, but if they have to keep it at Phoenix, we saw some promise today, in my opinion.
And now, before we continue, let's take a look at some of the comments. So, Adam says, congrats to Kevin Harvick on an outstanding career, the best Phoenix race of the weekend. And Demas says, goodbye, Kevin Harvick. Now, if we continue on, let's take a look at a driver who was in a bit of an unfortunate situation this race. We have Christopher Bell, who was done early in the race as his brake rotor exploded. He brought out the first caution for an incident in stage 2. Now, Bell was struggling with keeping it cool, and it blew when he entered the final corner, hitting the wall and ending Toyota's hopes for a championship this season. So, Ben, do you think this was a disappointing season overall for Toyota?
Well, it certainly ended in a disappointing fashion. I don't know if the entire season can be just written off as a complete disappointment here. Certainly you want to end the season with the hardware, and you want to end the season at least being able to fight for the hardware. And Christopher Bell couldn't even pull that off today, with being eliminated from contention midway through the race. I would have loved to have seen him mix it up in that battle between Larson and Blaney, and even Byron there at the end. He was right there as well. So it was an unfortunate deal for him. You think of Ty Gibbs. Obviously, I'm sure he would have loved to get a win in his first full-time season. Unfortunately for him, that didn't happen. Martin Truex Jr. obviously, it was kind of a situation like, where did he go? Until today, I guess, he was able to get up there and fight for the lead very briefly. But, certainly probably the worst playoff performance overall by a regular season champion since we started, making that distinction in 2017. Just a complete nosedive for that 19 team, unfortunately. Bubba Wallace going winless for the first time since he joined Toyota in 2311. Got to go back to 2020 with his Richard Petty Motorsports days. The last time he didn't win a race, and the last time he didn't win a playoff race as well. It's kind of ironic. The first time he makes the playoffs as a driver, obviously they did the owner swap last year, but the first time he makes the playoffs as a driver is the first time he doesn't win a race in the playoffs. So it's an unfortunate deal for him there. And then obviously, you can point to Denny Hamlin as well, not making the championship 4. I think that has to sting, and obviously, only adds to the pressure that Denny Hamlin's going to be under over the next couple of years, however much longer he keeps racing, to not retire as the best driver and never wear the crown, if you will. So, there are certainly things that you can pinpoint, and I'm sure every Toyota driver, is going to look back and, think of things that could have gone better for them. But, it's not like they completely laid an egg the entire year and, were absolutely nowhere and was on par with their 2007 season, or anything like that. They still have a lot to be proud of this year, and a lot to be proud in terms of what they accomplished. But at the same time, there's always room for improvement next year.
Yeah, Toyota, they had a good year, but I mean the finishing result here for the end result for Toyota, it's not what they wanted. I mean, Denny Hamlin probably should have made the Final Four. Martin Truex Jr., I don't know what happened in the playoffs. That was a disappointing disaster for Martin Truex Jr. But Denny Hamlin, him not making it after his fantastic year in the Final Four, that's very disappointing. But overall, I think there's a lot to be proud of for Toyota, because Bubba Wallace, although he did go winless for the first time since 2020, I mean, this was the year Bubba Wallace really took a huge step in consistency and competing more often. And he was a threat more often than not. I mean, today he was in the top 10 most of the day. And more often than not, you see him up in the top 5 every once in a while. And you just would not see that before. So huge gains. And also Tyler Reddick had a very solid season in his first year at 2311. And Ty Gibbs, I know he went winless in his rookie year, but this is a strong rookie year for him. I think he's going to be very strong next year in his sophomore season. But overall, Toyota had a good year. It didn't end the way they wanted it to, though, obviously.
Now, while Toyota had a disappointing finish to their season, here is an interesting stat for everyone. So, the final 9 seasons of the Winston Cup era saw 7 different drivers win the Winston Cup. The past 9 seasons of the playoff era have 7 drivers. Blaney today is the 8th. 2 consecutive championships for Team Penske, and now all 3 of their teams, the 2, 12, and 22, have a Cup Series Championship. The captain was at Phoenix, and earlier this week, we saw the new Ford Mustang for 2024. Now, for a while, we talked about how Ford struggled during the year. So, Alex, starting with you, are Team Penske and Ford the ones to beat? And don't forget, it's an even year for Joey Logano.
That's right, Isha. Ford, we talked about it. They just seemed kind of off, except for RFK. Like not just, I was about to say just Logano, but all of Team Penske. They were just kind of absent throughout the summer. Not really threats, but they really picked it up. I'm assuming they learned a lot from RFK. I'm assuming Ford really helped out with that. But just very interesting. I mean, Ford swept the Truck, Xfinity, and the Cup titles, by the way, in the year that there was supposedly an off year for them. So props to them. And Logano, it's an even year next year. So, I mean, he's going to be a threat. He'll probably make the championship 4 if the stats don't lie and the trends continue. But I mean, Ford, they have a new body next year. It might be good, might be bad. It's hard to say. I think Toyota is having a new body as well next year, if I'm not wrong on that. But something to watch for sure. But Team Penske, I said it earlier, can anyone beat them? I mean, 2 in a row with this Gen 7 car. They're the only ones who have won a championship with this car. It's we'll have to wait and see. I don't know, because this format you can't guarantee that. But I mean, right now they're 2 for 2.
I just tried to do some quick math in my head. I don't think Ford was able to overtake Toyota for second in the manufacturer standings. Chevy clinched the manufacturers championship last week. So I don't know. Maybe we need manufacturers playoffs for 2024. Then Steve Phelps can get on that. But it just looking at it from that perspective, I think Ford and Toyota were actually a little bit closer in performance by the end there than we might realize. So we were talking about it as at least at the start of the year, Ford kind of being behind the eight ball a little bit. Obviously they were able to figure things out by the end of it, sweeping the championships across all three divisions, and with the performance that they were able to find in the second half of the year, I think really showed, and especially with Team Penske and Ryan Blaney. RFK obviously took a huge step forward this year, and like you mentioned, Isha, it's an even year for Joey Logano. So I guess if you believe in numerology like that, he's a lock to make the championship 4 in 2024. Although I guess the San Francisco Giants would have been a lock to make the World Series each even year after they went on their stretch of 3 and 5 years, but that obviously didn't continue. So nothing's a guarantee for Team Penske and Joey Logano next year, but I suppose it is a good omen that every even year since this format started, he's made the championship 4. Maybe that streak will continue next year, maybe it won't, but I think it certainly has a very good chance of continuing based on where Team Penske is as an organization at this point in time right now.
And now to conclude, the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series Championship season is now over. The 75th season of NASCAR is in the books, and for this last question, we'll bring Joe in as he watched the 50th year of NASCAR in 1998. So, Alex, we'll start with you for this last question. What stands out from the 2023 season for you?
This was one of the most fun seasons I've watched, honestly, in a hot minute at least. Since I was a kid, I loved all the 2000s and everything, but I kind of fell out of love with NASCAR in the late 2010s, and 2020 I was just really sour on it, but I've really fallen back in love with NASCAR. This has been so much fun. A lot of the races are very entertaining for me. And this year, just so many races were just absolute bangers, and we're trying new things out. The Chicago Street Course is without a doubt my highlight from this season. That is just so cool. We had a rain race. He had Shane Van Gisbergen come over and win that race. That's my highlight of the year. And on a personal note, Ryan Blaney winning the championship is amazing. That's something I'm never going to forget watching. Really, really cool season for NASCAR.
I think what stands out to me is how close the front of the field and the back of the field are. And obviously, you still have, your Rick Ware Racings and your Live Fast Motorsports of the world. They're obviously, always going to kind of be in that 25th to 35th place range on most weekends. But now they're only, 3 or 4 laps down by the end of the race, and not 6, 8, or 10 like we would have seen the last several years. I think the next gen cars really brought the field together. We saw it obviously with all the different winners we had last year, and I think we continue to see it this year. Those teams that don't have the budgets, that don't have the prestige of your Hendricks and your Penskes and your Joe Gibbs Racings of the world, they still have a ways to go to get there, but I think they're closer than the backmarker teams of 10 or 15 years ago for sure would have been. So I think that, it's a great time to be a NASCAR fan if you like parity, if you like, watching a series where, there are legitimately up to, 20, maybe even 25 drivers that could win on any given race weekend should the circumstances fall their way. That's what stands out to me here in the 75th anniversary season, is just how close the pack is from the front of the field to the back of it.
The competition on the 75th season was something else. 1998, Jeff Gordon dominated, but I felt in 1998 it was a very different era of NASCAR. Essentially, we know it was the Winston Cup era, but you were in a transition where Jeff Gordon was the young, upcoming driver. Dale Earnhardt was still there, but he was not exactly the most dominant driver, dominant force. He got that very popular Daytona 500 win. This year, for the 75th, I think it really stood out. The competition, as everyone has mentioned, the new things we're doing as a sport here in NASCAR with the street course. We got the second generation car. I feel the clash at the Coliseum. I know it's the second year, but that's something that back in 1998, the 50th year, if someone was to tell everyone then, we'll be racing NASCAR 25 years from now at the LA Coliseum, I think you would have been laughed at and just not taken seriously. It has been a very fun year watching the NASCAR Cup Series overall. The competition is great. The racing has been pretty good overall. Second season of the car, we saw some of the issues from last year get addressed so they didn't rear their ugly head, thankfully. And overall, I just think a great 75th season for the record books and 25 more years, the 100th season of NASCAR. And who knows what we'll see then. But overall, a very exciting time for race fans, especially NASCAR. And I gotta say, when it comes to Formula One, switching over to that, we had a very exciting and chaotic start to the Brazilian Grand Prix. One of the big things we saw was a very, I would say, bizarre formation lap where we saw at the very beginning all the cars going to their formation lap. You don't anticipate anything. Trouble. Charles Leclerc goes out. Lando Norris, Max Verstappen. This was just something else for this race shaping up. And one of the big things I got to say overall is when it comes to this race, Verstappen, Norris, Fernando Alonso, they were your top three finishers. Fernando Alonso holding out Sergio Perez in that photo finish. We know the sprint race, that was pretty straightforward, but this race, I felt was overall very chaotic. The track favored the top end speeds. AlphaTauri, they had a great weekend overall. I mean, at one point, we saw them contending with the Mercedes. Daniel Ricciardo had not gotten that first lap damage. Probably could have been a bigger factor. Mercedes, they were just outpaced by so many folks. 15 cars finished the race. Isha, I got to ask you, starting with you, does this stand out as one of the best races of 2023 for Formula One?
Joe, personally, I don't really feel like it was one of the best races. As you mentioned, it was certainly one of the most chaotic, especially with, Charles Leclerc's race being over even before it started, and then the other drivers who didn't get to finish the race. It was certainly very chaotic, and I feel like the best moment of the race was probably the fight that we saw between Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez for third place. But overall, if you're looking at the big picture, I think that we've had better races this season.
Yeah, I can't really say if it was the best race of 2023, but we did see some interesting battles, like you said, Nisha. Alonso, Sergio Perez. I wish they could have given me that for a couple of hours. Lap after lap, I would have been very happy. But nonetheless, that was definitely the highlight of the race for me. But I'm really glad we still race at Interlagos. Still think it's one of the great classic Formula One tracks, and good thing that they're going to be there for the foreseeable future, because I really love this track, and hopefully as Formula One gets into this new rules package in 2026. Holding over for the next couple of years or so. Hopefully the racing will get better so we can see one of those classic races in Brazil.
Now for Ferrari, as I mentioned, Leclerc did not start, not great at all. Considering this, the last four races, both Ferrari drivers have won, did not start. Both of them due to mechanical issues. In this case for Leclerc, very dramatic. On the way to the grid during that formation lap, the hydraulic failure, maybe the engine went out, just locked up, and he crashed right into the wall. Sainz, he was in a tight battle. Essentially, one of the big things, though, he didn't really have a whole lot for Alonso and Lando Norris today. And when it comes to that battle in the championship points, right now, it is starting to affect him as you take a look at the driver standings. Essentially, going from a tie with Fernando Alonso to now you're behind Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso sixth place. So surprisingly, the other thing too, with this race for Mercedes not going that great, you got Ferrari. They're essentially 20 points behind Mercedes in the constructor. So there's still a lot of time with 2 races remaining. A double DNF for Mercedes could be potential for Ferrari. But overall, I got to ask everyone this question, and we're going to start with Kobe. What's going on in Ferrari in that organization? It seems like they're getting better than the last 4 races. And do you think Sainz, now that he's lost to Alonso and Lando, could reclaim 4th? Or could even Ferrari compete against Mercedes in the constructors? They just seem like they're all over the place.
Ferrari gonna Ferrari, right? Because that was the most ridiculous formation lap that I've seen in a while. I don't even know what went wrong there with Charles Leclerc. It was just a really unfortunate set of circumstances. but Ferrari, they've just been too inconsistent. One week they look like they can compete and get some really good points, and then other weeks was like, what in the world is going on with the team? If it's not strategy that's gone wrong, it's something like this. A very disappointing day for Leclerc and Sainz, losing spots in the championship. Not good for him at all. If Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin can have more runs to close out the season like they had today, I certainly think Alonso can stay up there as well. And I think it might maybe really hard for Carlos Sainz to reclaim fourth unless we see looking at what we've seen with Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin. They just came out of nowhere this weekend because as we saw earlier in the season, this team was on fire, and then they kind of disappeared for several months where they weren't having good races at all. And all of a sudden, we saw the Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin team that we saw earlier on in the season. If they can keep that up, McLaren keep giving great cars to Lando Norris, I think they might be okay during this last stretch of the season.
Yeah, Joe, I wish I knew what was going on with Ferrari. For the Ferrari fans out there, I know it must be hard. And while I say this, I'm pretending that I don't have a Ferrari poster up on my wall right there. But to give a more serious answer, I'm not even sure what's wrong with Ferrari. I don't know if it's just the car or if it's the team management or just at this point, I don't even know what's wrong with them or how they could fix it. Um, and as far as the second half of the question goes, can Sainz reclaim that fourth place ahead of Alonso and Lando Norris? I don't see it happening, especially when you've got Lando Norris in front of you in such a speedy and improved McLaren. And can Ferrari overtake Mercedes? I know we've got 2 races left. I don't really see it happening because with Ferrari, you've got days like Singapore where, one of the drivers will put up an insane performance, and then you've got a race today where the race will be over even before it starts. So I just feel like Ferrari's got to find whoever the bad luck charm is on their team, and just I guess kick them out of the team because I just don't know how the next season's gonna go. I hope they're able to fix whatever's going wrong at this point, but you don't even know what's going wrong. So I think it's going to be really tough for them to figure out how to fix and improve for next season.
The answer's right in front of us. It's the track we were at today. It was 15 years ago, and Timo Glock set a curse on this team, I guess, when Lewis Hamilton passed him for 5th place. This is how long it's been. And Felipe Massa is apparently still trying to get that championship overturned because it hurt him so badly. Like, this team has just been cursed for the last 15 years. They haven't won either championship, the drivers or the constructors. They continue to do things like this. They are a mediocre Formula One franchise based on their prestige and their history and the results that they've given us. They can't seem to do anything right. They can't seem to close the deal here. I know they won in Singapore with Carlos Sainz, so congratulations to them on that. They're, I guess, the only winners other than Red Bull so far this year. But it's just at the point now where we can't even be surprised anymore. This is what they do. This is who they are. They are the Dallas Cowboys of Formula One. What can go wrong will go wrong. And I feel bad for Leclerc now. What is he up to? 10 consecutive pole positions that have been won by Max Verstappen or been won by somebody else, whatever that stat is. It's just unbelievable, except it's not because it's Ferrari. That's the situation that we have right now. So to answer the second part of the question, no, Carlos Sainz is not going to reclaim 4th. And no, Ferrari's not going to overtake Mercedes. I think Mercedes continue to, undersell their performance this year. I know they had an off weekend, especially compared to last year, taking the 1-2 this race, but I think they're going to hang on for second. I don't think the W14 is as bad as Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton are making it out to be. I think they just had an off weekend this weekend. I think they're going to hang on to second because, quite frankly, I don't even trust Ferrari to so much as take the green flag, let alone overtake Mercedes once again for second place in the constructors. It's not going to happen.
The thing, too, with all this, you mentioned prestige, Ferrari. They've been there since the first year of F1. The culture behind Ferrari, the fan base. When we go to Las Vegas, there's a huge Ferrari dealership there. Ferrari's going to have the red carpet out for their VIP guests. Is Charles Leclerc really going to set another record for another pole just to not win the race? Something like this. I feel at this point it's almost, as Jackson Lambros would say, is almost becoming like the cartoon Anvil team, and that's Ferrari. It's just what could go wrong can go wrong, and I just don't believe this. And I just still won't forget. I just looked away, turned around, and I see Charles Leclerc on the wall, on the formation lap. I'm thinking, Was that Sainz? What happened? And no, that was Leclerc, your front row. And it's like, oh boy, what a dreadful weekend for them. Mercedes, I would say a dreadful weekend for them as well too. Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, just no pace. That set them back into points. Hamilton is now 32 points behind Perez, and Perez had a great effort today, just so close to getting that podium, but just essentially one lap too much long because he had third place until Alonso got around him. But now with 2 races remaining, Perez, if he leaves Las Vegas with 25 points or more ahead of Hamilton, he has second place wrapped up. So Ben, starting with you, does this relieve some pressure from Perez after a strong race weekend?
I just want to circle back one more thing on Ferrari. You know who's driven for them in the last 15 years? Kimi Raikkonen, Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, Charles Leclerc, all world champions or world championship caliber talents. They still haven't won anything in the last 15 years. So that just adds further insult to the injury there. Let's talk about Sergio Perez, because I think this was a good weekend for him. I think it was a weekend that he certainly needed in his fight to do something that one of the few things, potentially maybe the only thing now that Red Bull have never done in the sport, aside from take the perfect season, which nobody's ever done. They're not going to do this year, but finish 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship. I think that is absolutely what Checo needs to do if he wants to stay in good standing with Helmut Marko for sure, but I would say the entirety of Red Bull Racing going into next year. This is exactly what he needed. I know that he's got to be feeling a little bit not being able to get Alonso there at the line, especially after he passed him and had him for about a lap, and then Alonso ended up getting him back, and he came so close in that photo finish for the final spot on the podium. But you look at it mathematically, he still finished ahead of Hamilton today. That's exactly what he needed to do. It's what he needs to continue to do to hold on to that second place spot, which I suppose, if you look at the margin that he's got right now, roughly, what was it, 32 points, I think? I know we just took the point standings off the graphic here, but, I think that, there we go. Yeah, 32 points. So he could theoretically leave Las Vegas with that clinched and go into Abu Dhabi, not even having to worry about it. I think that would be a very good place for Checo to be in. And I have much better confidence after this race weekend that he's going to be able to hang on to second. I know we just talked about, maybe the W14 isn't as bad as Mercedes feel like it is after this weekend, but I don't think it's as good as the Red Bull. I think that's objective fact. I don't think any car has obviously been as good as the Red Bull this year. Checo has the best car in the grid, or one of the best with Max. He has everything that he needs to have to hold on to this position, including a more than one race lead at this point. So he can leave Las Vegas without that pressure. I think you can still consider the season, in spite of the struggles, in spite of the ups and downs, you can still consider it a success if he comes home second in a championship behind his legendary teammate Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ben here. This race must have definitely relieved him of some of the pressure. And I think that with that, it's also going to help him regain that confidence after his unfortunate performance and crash from his home Grand Prix in Mexico. So I think that this will definitely help him. And as Ben pointed out, he has the best set of circumstances to hold on to that second place in the driver's standings. So I think that really he's in a really great spot right now, and I think that, the remaining 2 races, if he's able to keep up what he's doing now with the car, I think he's going to be in a good spot.
Yeah, I definitely think this race has to feel like a race win for Sergio Perez. I'm sure he would have definitely gotten by Fernando Alonso there at the line on the last lap, but hey, it's still much better performance than what we've seen from him for the last several months, and I think he can definitely use his momentum and use it towards his advantage as we close out this 2023 season. And where are we going next week? Las Vegas, a street circuit, and Sergio Perez, a lot of people like to call him King of the Streets, and there's no better time to reclaim that nickname of King of the Streets than to get a win on the Las Vegas Strip.
King of the Streets, Sergio Perez. If he could do that on the Las Vegas Strip, that would be huge for his confidence. Just put the final touches on second place, Abu Dhabi, carefree. Just focus on 2024. AlphaTauri, I gotta say, they're feeling really good, and they're making their battle for 7th place really interesting in the constructor standings. They're now 7 points behind Williams, who failed to score a point after Alex Albon was caught up in that lap 1 crash with Kevin Magnussen. And the top speed AlphaTauri display today, including the sprint race with Daniel Ricciardo up there, they were hard to beat. Could have easily been a double point day if Ricciardo did not get damage from that first lap crash. But Kobe, I gotta ask you, when it comes to AlphaTauri, Do you think they have what it takes in them to overtake Williams for seventh place in the constructors?
Well, to be honest with you, Joe, I think there's a chance that AlphaTauri can overtake Williams in the constructor standings here. I think you kind of have a 2-1 advantage right now, and not trying to pick on Logan Sargent, but Alex Albon is basically fighting on his own when you have Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, two drivers who are very capable of scoring points for AlphaTauri. If Daniel Ricciardo can avoid that look and Yuki Tsunoda not be overly aggressive and get himself into trouble and score points and maximize what comes their way in the next few Grand Prix, I certainly think those drivers have what it takes to get those points necessary to overtake Williams in the constructors. While Alex Albon, he's probably going to have to be Superman, because we haven't really seen, these performances from Logan Sargent where we can feel confident in him giving some help to Albon there in the constructors and scoring important points for Williams.
Now, let's give Logan some credit where it's due. Obviously, he got the point at Circuit of the Americas. He came very close to the points today. I know there was a lot of attrition, but I wouldn't be shocked if he picks up another point or two. But you are right, Kobe. It is very much Alex Albon who's carried Williams up to seventh in the constructors. But I mean, I'll tell you guys this: I wouldn't put it past Alfa Romeo or Haas. The margins are so small when you're only scoring 1 or 2 points at a time, and you're only on 12 points for the entire year, or 16 or 28. You're just one shock podium away from completely turning the order of 7th through 10th in the constructors on its head there. If we can pull the standings back up there. It's just, Valtteri Bottas could take a shock podium for Alfa Romeo here. I actually have Haas in 10th on my end and Alfa Romeo on 9th. I'm not sure if that's a mistake on my end or your show, but regardless, those are your bottom two teams. And then you have AlphaTauri and Williams just ahead of them there. All it takes, it would be amazing to see Nico Hulkenberg finally get that podium. I don't expect it to happen, but we've seen Pierre Gasly win a race in AlphaTauri. We've seen Esteban Ocon win a race in Alpine the last couple of years. We're going to a track that is certainly an unknown with Las Vegas coming up. I wouldn't put it past any of these bottom 4 teams to finish 7th in the constructors. So definitely AlphaTauri with a margin of only 7 points, and the way Ricciardo's driving now, coming back from his injury, I think it's very much possible that we could see a switch for 7th there, especially when you take into consideration, like Kobe was mentioning, Alex Albon has scored the majority of those points for Williams. So if AlphaTauri can maximize that and kind of take that 2-1 advantage, then we're going to have a fight on our hands for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you here, and I don't have really much to add on to that, but as Ben pointed out, those last 4 teams, I think it's really close between them, and I think that AlphaTauri could definitely overtake Williams for that 7th place. And as Kobe mentioned, if you're looking at the scoring points ratio for AlphaTauri to Williams, it really is a 2-1. Obviously Logan does have that point, but it's really mostly Alex Albon that's scoring for Williams. So I think that AlphaTauri's definitely got a really good chance of taking the 7th place. But as as they mentioned, any of those last 4th place teams could really switch around in the standings by the end of the season.
They'll keep switching around, and one of the things, while there's a lot of battles behind the pack, up front, the lead, Max Verstappen, still on the top step, broke the tie with Alan Prost. He has now 52 wins and is one behind Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time champion with Red Bull, and many expected Verstappen to tie Vettel from Red Bull when he was there at Las Vegas for the number of wins and potentially surpass him at Abu Dhabi. If for some reason that doesn't happen this year, I think it would be a huge shock if that does not occur. Definitely next year, everyone's anticipating that. So Isha, starting with you, how significant will it be for Verstappen to surpass Vettel? Does he make the case that he's the best Red Bull driver of all time?
Joe, obviously it would be really big for him to surpass Vettel, but at this point, it's not surprising given the season that he's had. And if we're looking at the second half of that question, I feel like while with his performances, you can say that he makes the case for the best Red Bull driver, I feel like it's too early. He's too young, and it's just overall too early to call him the best Red Bull driver, given the past drivers that Red Bull has had. So I think that if we give it a few more years, that's definitely the title that he'll earn. But as of right now, I think it's a little too early.
I'm not sure it is too early. He's a 3-time world champion, and you look at how many races he's won. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think all of his wins have come with Red Bull, right? Whereas Sebastian Vettel won a race in the Toro Rosso, and then obviously won several races with Ferrari there at the end of his career. I know we have more races in a season now than we did when Vettel was winning his 4 straight championships. But I think, if anything, it's only going to take 1 year. But I think, when you look at Sebastian Vettel, obviously a very talented driver, a 4-time world champion, but I think Max is certainly, if he hasn't surpassed Vettel yet, we can certainly put him on that level. Kind of breaking into that realm of multiple-time world champions and all-time greats. Verstappen is certainly there. But I will say this, though, if you want to look ahead to the future, it was only a decade ago that Sebastian Vettel won his 4th straight Drivers' Championship. Red Bull won their 4th straight Constructors. And Vettel specifically said, we have to remember these days. There's no guarantee that they will last forever. And they did not, because the regulations changed in 2014, and then Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton went on their run of dominance. So everybody at Red Bull has to appreciate these moments and appreciate these days while they have them, because while I don't anticipate that Max Verstappen's never going to win a race for Red Bull again, just like Sebastian Vettel didn't once the 2014 season began, that the possibility of that happening is greater than zero. So, you can't take these moments for granted. You have to celebrate every win like it might be your last. I don't think it's going to be Max Verstappen's last. I think he's going to win many more races for many years to come. But there are no guarantees in this sport. All it's going to take is for a team like Mercedes, or somehow, some way, maybe Ferrari do it. I don't expect that to happen, like we were mentioning here at the beginning of this segment. But if somebody can kind of flip the switch and come up with a competitive car, if McLaren can start the season the way they've been ending their last couple of seasons, at the very least, it's going to be a lot more competitive. And I think that, Max racking off all these wins and championships, again, I don't think he's won his last race, but there are people saying, he's going to break Lewis's record and, win every championship through the end of his contract in 28. I think that's far from a guarantee. I think they have to, not take these days for granted and celebrate these moments while they're living in them here.
Yeah, Ben, you brought up a lot of excellent points. The Max Verstappen era of domination, it definitely will not last forever, and that's a given. But I'm sure Red Bull is definitely enjoying these time while it lasts, because at some point, with the regulations change coming in 2026, there might be another team out there who's gonna completely get that car right, and Red Bull might be fighting for second or third. We could see McLaren go on a run, as you mentioned, with how great they've been running. It might be McLaren and Lando Norris, McLaren and Oscar Piastri, or even both, start dominating Formula One in the next couple of years or so. Max Verstappen might be in a position where Lewis Hamilton is in right now, just trying to collect as many points as you can and get as many podiums as you can, or put yourself in the right position if something goes wrong to try to steal a win. And obviously it will be significant for Max Verstappen when he surpasses Sebastian Vettel. Definitely not if, it's when. It's just a matter of time. Two great drivers. Red Bull's lucky to have two of the best Formula One drivers to drive for their team there. And comparing the two, Vettel and Verstappen, for greatest Red Bull driver of all time, I'm not going to really get into that, but I will say, that they've done some incredible things, and their era of domination came in 2 completely different eras of Formula One.
Now, after Vettel, there's only Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton ahead in the most wins. Red Bull still only have one race where they didn't get that podium. It's Singapore Grand Prix, which of course Sainz won. Now a break until Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Last time the United States saw a race in Las Vegas for Formula One, wasn't exactly the greatest of races. The last time we saw Formula One in the United States, Max Verstappen was booed while he was getting the trophies for the wins. Now, we know some folks have talked about booing in sports, and particularly in motorsports, especially when you have a driver or a team dominating. As we approach Vegas, there's a lot of hype about this. Street course, Formula One's huge compared to back then when it was coming to Vegas. We anticipate a different crowd compared to Texas, because we know the ticket prices were pretty high. They're really rolling out the red carpet. They're hoping a lot of celebrities are there. But Kobe, starting with you, with the hype of this new race, do you anticipate a thrilling return to Las Vegas for Formula One, or a forgettable one where Max Verstappen might just dominate the weekend?
Well, there's not really no telling the Las Vegas race is going to go right now. I know the atmosphere, of being in Las Vegas, that's very exciting. It's Sin City. You get to see the strip and all of the great sights there. So I'm sure, just the atmosphere and the anticipation of racing under the lights on the Las Vegas Strip is very exciting for people. On the Formula One video game, I tried this track out. It's an interesting track, very, very, very tight, and get up to some high speeds in certain sections. And I really hope it'll be a great race on the Las Vegas Strip. But we'll find out in just a couple of weeks' time. I think the hype of the race will definitely be up there. People will be very excited to see how this will go. But looking where things have been, it's more than likely going to end up being another dominant night for Max Verstappen. Maybe Sergio Perez can bring out the King of the Streets mantra again. We can see him at least take the fight to Max, or potentially could we see a surprise winner with neither Red Bull driver winning. I think that would be the best possible scenario given how this season's going, but it's more than likely going to be a race where Max Verstappen will dominate again. But I'm sure Formula One is hoping that we get some fireworks under the lights on the Las Vegas Strip. And Joe, you mentioned, Max Verstappen booing. I know a lot of people are very upset to see booing, and based on my observation, it seems to be like a cultural difference thing, like the American way versus the European way, because I see people who are from Europe, they're like more upset like this because in their culture, this is something, that you don't really see, while in American motorsports and just American sports in general, booing is just a normal part of sports. People, you're either going to cheer, you're going to boo. And as Dale Earnhardt used to say, he didn't really care what they did as long as they're making noise.
Yeah, I agree with Kobe here. I think that it's hard to tell what the Las Vegas race is going to look like, but with all the hype that's created and the fact that it's in Vegas, it's set to be a very thrilling race. However, if we see another regular Max Verstappen domination for the whole weekend, then that's definitely going to dull the enjoyment of the race. But, in order for it to truly be thrilling, it would definitely have to be a non-Max Verstappen win. And as Kobe said, maybe even a non-Red Bull win, because even if Sergio Perez wins, that would still dull the moment a little bit because the winning team at the end of the day is Red Bull. So overall, it's a little hard to predict what the race is going to be out like, but just given that it's in Las Vegas, it's definitely going to be more thrilling.
I'm just going to be really upset if Red Bull only lose one race this year. Like, if they got the perfect season, like, at least that gives us something to talk about. At least that's kind of cool. At least we can, say that that's never been done before. But if Singapore is the only race, I mean, I'm hopeful that Mercedes or Ferrari or maybe even a McLaren or Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin can break through here one of these final two races and take a shock win. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little nervous for this race. I'm not going to lie. Starting at 10 p.m. local time, 1 a.m. East Coast time, is it really going to be worth staying up until 3 a.m. Eastern time for another Max Verstappen win? I think that's something that a lot of fans are going to have to consider here. Is the hype going to match the product and the start time for a lot of these fans that we're going to see here? But it is an unknown. There's no, like Kobe was mentioning, there's no real way to predict what's exactly going to happen, at least all throughout the pack. I think we can all predict another Max Verstappen victory in all likelihood, but I suppose it's not a guarantee. There are no guarantees anytime you go to a track for the first time, or a new street circuit in this case, I should say, for the first time. I'm sure the atmosphere is going to be electric for everybody who's rich enough to attend the event. But at the same time, I don't know that the TV experience is going to match the amount of media hype and attention that this race has been getting ever since it was first announced.
And I just want to add something real quick here, something that Ben was talking about. It made me think of it, but what would truly make this race thrilling, and living up to the hype? It would be if one of the McLarens won, specifically Lando Norris. If that's who won at the end of the day in Vegas, I feel like that's what would make it the most thrilling, even more than a Ferrari winning. But that's all I wanted to say.
The most thrilling would be Logan Sargent winning it for Williams. That would be absolutely incredible. But I understand that the McLaren aspect or a possibility that you mentioned, Nisha, obviously that's much more likely. But the American national anthem on the podium in Las Vegas, I think that would be absolutely incredible.
If people are awake,
if Haas get a win, I guess we get it that way too.
Yeah, if people are awake to see it.
Yeah, that's true too.
I bet if Logan Sargent was anywhere near the podium with 5 laps to go, I think people will be, hey, wake up. You're not going to believe this. You got to catch this. Because even if for some reason he got 4th place, still, that's going to be a huge celebration, similar to when Mark Webber got his nearly a podium in a minority in Australia long ago, early on in his career. But yeah, that would be something else if we heard the national anthem. That would probably make top stories in a lot of news outlets if that happened around the world, especially here in the United States. And of course, that's where Formula One's be heading to next. Ben, we're getting down to it when it comes to the grid rank, and we only got 4 series left.
That's right, Joe. No change in the top 10. Of course, we only had Formula One and NASCAR this weekend, and Max Verstappen's already, as he has done with the F1 World Championship, already clinched our grid ranking championship as well. NASCAR's highest driver is William Byron, 11th, and for the second straight year, no NASCAR driver in the top 10 of the grid ranking. And that will be finalized, of course, with NASCAR ending their season today. First time a NASCAR Cup Series Championship driver is not in the grid ranking, ironically enough, as well. So we'll bring Alex back in here for this one, and we'll start with you, Alex. Formula One's been the most dominated series, obviously with Max Verstappen. This year's Cup Series, however, despite the fewer winners from the first year of an next-gen car last year, it's still seen a good amount of parity between the teams and manufacturers. Did you feel like this year was equally as chaotic despite fewer winners, or do you still see, is there any possibility for one particular team or driver or manufacturer to break out next year and kind of go on a Kyle Larson 2021 style run of dominance? Where do you see NASCAR as we look ahead to 2024?
Yeah, NASCAR is in a very interesting position because they have this new Gen 7 car. I don't know if we're going to see someone come out and dominate, because you could see Blaney go out, and if Blaney of the past few weeks comes out next year, he might go on a tear. You might see Logano have a tear. Logano hasn't really had that yet in his career. I mean, you could have Chase Elliott. You could have Kyle Larson do another tour. William Byron could just really take off. He showed a lot of bright spots this year. Like, there's a lot of guys who could do it, and that's kind of why I don't think we're going to, because there's just too many good guys right now. And with this car, as you mentioned earlier, Ben, these cars are so close right now that I don't know if we're going to see that for quite a while. I don't think we're going to see a Jimmy Johnson-like dominance either, especially with how this format is. I don't know. It's really interesting. Just, you might see different people shine throughout the next few years. I mean, earlier this year even, within the same season, Denny Hamlin looked like he was the guy. And then it was Kyle Larson. But then Blaney just at the last minute, last 4 races, just, that was all you needed. So I don't know about that. But in regards to the season being chaotic, I really don't think it was. Maybe for Truck Series, that was chaotic. But Cup Series, last year was way more chaotic, in my opinion. There was just so much unpredictability. You didn't really know what was going on. But this year, it felt more like the actual racing was the center. And while last year was more on drama, can your car not fall apart? Because like Texas last year was a disaster. Then there was so much penalties going on last year. This year just really felt like it was focused on the actual racing and the drivers rather than off-track stuff and negativity. Like, I don't think this year was more chaotic by any means.
I feel the closest team to potentially go break out and get a lot of wins is Hendrick, with what we saw with William Byron. I feel with NASCAR, the season's so long, though, as we're seeing, it's not so much how much you could dominate, but when you could get on a hot streak at what key moment. Because, as was mentioned earlier, when Ryan Blaney, after Talladega, it just seemed a flip went off where top 10 finishes, 12th at the Roval, but he was not in the must-win situation at that point. And he gets the championship. If William Byron, I think it just seemed like after Martinsville, where he was just not exactly there, almost. If he had lost 3 more spots, a couple more spots, it would have been Denny Hamlin that championship for instead. I feel overall the NASCAR Cup Series, it is just a matter of having a perfect race weekend and getting that momentum, that hot streak at the right time, because Martin Truex Jr. was great all season. Didn't have the most wins, but he was up there, got the regular season championship. Nothing in the playoffs. This was one of his best races when he's not a playoff contender no more at Phoenix. Mm-hmm. I feel the season is just so long compared to Formula One, IndyCar, where you see a driver like Verstappen, Alex Palou dominate. It's just so hard to dominate in NASCAR. The competition's really close. It's amazing the fact that 2 years with this, and Ford has the only championship out of the manufacturers. Next year, Chevrolet is determined. Rick Hendrick, that team, they're really strong. I think William Byron is going to be one of the favorites for next year. But again, it's going to come down to getting hot in the postseason, the playoffs, because if you have no momentum in that round of 8, you could kiss your championship chances goodbye because you have a hard time making it through.
Yeah, and of course, to Alex's point, we'll have a full recap of all the chaos from the Truck Series finale and the Xfinity Series and ARCA West finales as well on Grid Live Encore tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. In the meantime, let's take a look at the rest of the grid ranking here. We only have Formula One, MotoGP, Supercars, and World Rally Championship left in terms of the series that still have to finish out their seasons. Next weekend, only MotoGP, so it will be a regularly scheduled pre-race show, but an unusually early wrap-up show on Sunday following the MotoGP race, and then 2 more weekends of a few races with the 4 remaining series in the grid ranking still finishing out their years. Now let's bring everybody back in here and hand it over to Kobe for the one shining moment.
That's right. One of our favorite moments. And if you're in the chat watching our show live or watching the replay later, please let us know down in the comments below. What's one moment that stood out the most to you this racing weekend, or since it's the NASCAR season finale? What's your one shining moment of the entire 2023 NASCAR season? So Isha, I'm going to throw it over to you at your one shining moment from this weekend.
For mine, I'm going to pull from Formula One and give it to Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso for that tight battle the last few laps. As a Formula One fan, that's what we log on for, even though we know Max Verstappen's going to win every race, but it's those close battles in between really skilled, talented drivers that really stands out. And fun fact, I was actually sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store waiting to go in to get the groceries, but I was like, no, I have to watch what happens. There's like 1 lap left, and it was so close until the end. And that's just, that's what reminds you of why you love Formula One in the first place. Again, it's those close battles and races. So I have to give it to that. It was really, really interesting to watch.
My one shiny moment goes to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Just kidding. So I'm going to give it to Kevin Harvick, not Ryan Blaney, although I want to. I've done that. That'd be 3 weeks in a row. I can't do that. Giving it to Kevin Harvick, shiny moment, because what a career Kevin Harvick has had. 60 career wins in the Cup Series. He's a 2014 Cup Series champion, 2007 Daytona 500 winner, 3-time Brickyard 400 winner, and he won the Southern 500 twice. He has 251 top 5s, 444 top 10s, 31 poles. He led 16,058 laps and has an average finish of 12th in the Cup Series. Just remarkable career. I'm very excited to see how he does in the TV booth. I think he's going to be a fantastic asset to Fox Sports. They definitely need someone like him, I think, up there. But yeah, 100% shiny moment goes to Kevin Harvick.
Oh, you didn't stick with the Truck Series, Alex? I thought for sure you were going to give Corey Haim and Carson Hocevar your shining moments there. You actually kind of stole mine, though. I'm going to stick with Kevin Harvick, but I'm going to go a step further and talk about specifically his performance at Phoenix, because Kevin Harvick finished with the end of his career today. An incredible run at this racetrack. 21 consecutive top 10s dating back to 2013 that he's finished a Cup race at this track in the top 10. That is an absolutely unbelievable stretch. When you think of everything that can go wrong in the Cup Series, and something could happen to Christopher Bell today. That never happened to Kevin Harvick at this track the last 10 years. He always stepped up his game. He always performed at this track. Probably should have won the spring race here, if we're being honest. I know he got a little bit screwed over on an overtime restart and ended up shuffled back a little bit. But, man, what a career for Kevin Harvick, and what a run at Phoenix Raceway in particular for Harvick and the entire number 4 team, and even dating back to his final year at RCR. That's how long it's been the last time Kevin Harvick did not finish in the top 10 at Phoenix. An incredible run for him.
My shiny moment has to go to the NASCAR Cup Series champion, Ryan Blaney. A great racing family. His grandfather raced, of course. His dad, Dave Blaney, raced in the Cup Series. Came so close to winning the Daytona 500. A lot of folks think that race should have been called after that big jet fire from the jet dryer explosion. But Ryan Blaney, what a season. Wasn't exactly the most spectacular. One point, Kyle Petty called him out. Then it just seems he in the playoffs. A lot of folks didn't have him going out of the first round. Busted a lot of brackets this year. 2023, Ryan Blaney, my shining moment for winning the Cup Series Championship.
We've already talked a lot about him, so I'm just going to add on to Kevin Harvick. What a career he's had. Kevin Harvick actually won the very first race I ever watched, the 2007 Daytona 500, and now many years later, he's retired at the end of 2023. It's really crazy to think about what's happened since my very first race in February 2007 all the way to November 2023, and Harvick been the last full-time driver from the Winston Cup era. I'm sure that's going to make a lot of people feel old, but it's been really remarkable what Kevin Harvick's been able to do with his NASCAR career. And Ben, you were talking about his incredible streak of top 10 finishes at Phoenix. You also have to think about that he also did all of this through the reconfigurations of Phoenix as well. So that was very another impressive thing on his outright. And I think Kevin Harvick's going to do really well looking at what's ahead in his NASCAR career as he moves to the Fox Sports broadcast booth in 2024. And also, before I hand it over to you, Joe, want to add one personal shining moment. I'm really going to miss my team over at the podium finish. I'm not sure if I've announced it here on the air yet, but this was my last race weekend as a member of the team. I've been a part of the podium finish since March 2018. This has been a team that has really believed in me since the very first day I went there. They saved me from a group that didn't really believe in me, and I really appreciate everything Rob Tiongson, Nathan Solomon, Luis Torres, everyone over there has done for me over the years. I wouldn't be where I am without them. I'm just deeply appreciative for all of the friendships that I've been able to make over there. I'm really going to miss them a lot in 2024.
Great team, and of course, definitely that's a great shining moment, and we encourage everyone, be sure to support the Grid Network team here through Patreon. Invest in the Grid Network. We want to get our team to the tracks in 2024. We bring great coverage to you each and every week, especially right here on YouTube. Hit that bell icon, subscribe. If you're looking for more motorsports opportunities, check out our LinkedIn page as well too. Definitely, we encourage everyone to visit Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. You could buy a cup of coffee, super chat to a particular member of the Grid Network team. They'll thank you on there. And of course, if you do join our Patreon, like Colin the Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, you get some Grid Network stickers to show off to your friends in motorsports that you support the Grid Network. Now, a couple of last comments in the chat room from the shining moment. Adam, his shining moment, Dave Blaney being at Phoenix to see his son win at the NASCAR Championship. That was something Blaney said he was very thankful having his parents there, his entire family. 2023, the year of Max. That's definitely an understatement. I think it's been the Max Verstappen Red Bull show, Red Bull world, as some folks would say.
Hey, Joe, just one final note before we sign off. I promise this is my last unprovoked shot at Ferrari of the night. Dave Blaney deserves the 2012 Daytona 500 more than Felipe Massa deserves the 2008 Formula One championship. I'll just leave it at that.
Definitely, we encourage everyone to comment in the chat room with your questions, opinions, and of course, Ben will be on the air tomorrow. Trucks, ARCA West, Xfinity, go be on the air Wednesday. When Motorsports will be on the air again, and then MotoGP weekend for the Grid Live pre-race and wrap-up. For Isha, Kobe, Alex, and Ben, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.